Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah Akbar. 道可道非常道，名可名非常名。Ja Rastafari. Deus nos te quies in cele sanctificito nomen tuum. Vahe Guru Satnam. Baruch ata Elohim Eloheinu melech haolam she'ekol nihya b'divaro. Amen. Kyrie eleison, sevomas tu savajikatehe, sabe sata bovantu sukitata. Fagabia. Akwaba upendo na amani. Fikiri in Islami. Chinta dam permir. Dia bovamir. Omajeka. Ubuntu shabono fakitko. Shashen. Como senida. Domo arigato. Pilama yelo boka toko doko shingun. Gomen God. God, we thank you for always that you bless us. Ata jam yata afanami. Mado. Ho. Om shanti shanti shanti. Amen. This is actually from washing the face. But I can't say the same for the silkiness on the back. Hada. Anyways. I'm beginning with a positive. I'm beginning with a positive. I'm beginning with a positive. I am beginning with a positive. Gorilla mode on an apple. Revolutionary. Consider whether apples actually grow naturally in the habitat of gorillas. It tends to be further colder climate. You look at the nature of produce. Colder climate. This is just a recent observation that we just invitation for reasoning. Colder climate produce seems to have tendency of having thin skin. I don't know if this is actually cold climate. I just know this is like citrus, like oranges and things like that. Thick skin, bananas, thick skin. Coconut, thick skin. Again, it's just a very, very, like, extremely brief observation, like a very immediate observation without like doing extensive research and consideration, but just an interesting initial joint. That's not the beginning of the positive, though. We got further positive. I gotta think what that is now. So in this condition of recent days of warmth, it's actually not that hot, to be honest. I'm residing here in this space, and it is a cave without. I mean, it has actually decent natural ventilation, but these types of caves, man-constructed caves, are constructed generally and maintained generally with the presumption of some type of climate control methodology, air conditioning, fan, something like that. So without that, it does like it gets stuffy. In addition, even with all the windows open, and additionally, and we've got windows on like those sides. So point being, it tends to be warmer here than it is outside. Particularly, the humidity gets stuffy, so it's much further airy outside. So it is what it is. But it precipitates the perspiration, and all that. So in this experience and being without the electricity primarily. Oh, I know. Wait, this is plugged in right now. Oh, I'm such a hypocrite. I am such a hypocrite. It provides a further appreciation for attunement, acculturation with the agriculturation. How about that? Meaning this, much further taste right now for fresh produce, particularly fruit, even vegetables. Oh, we got some carrots here. Some people call carrots evil. Well, come on now. Anyways, that's not hate on anybody who says that per se. Not hate on anybody, but just like let's reason about that if you want to take it seriously. But anyways, we understand some of the rationale behind that, but we also recognize it's a very significant over exaggeration coming from an experience of continual marginalization, and thus the overcompensation without the actual realization or recognition or actualization of solution nation. How about that? Anyways, that being said, we have a fine appreciation for natural produce in the season. That's the positive. That's what we're beginning with, the positive. This is air conditioning right here. This is natural air conditioning. What up? Water, natural air conditioning. And the whole word empowerment is a pimp word, so but it's very commonly utilized. But for the purpose of like independence, autonomy, like like integrity of self, getting acclimated to the natural air conditioning, the natural heating, off grid, so to speak. I mean, this is purchased out of the store, but just recognizing. Here's the positive: being attuned and having a taste, having a yearning for the produce, the natural produce, the local natural produce, the indigenous produce in its season, when the blueberries are growing, having a taste for that and feeling that, feeling like, yo, the blueberries are coming through, and partaking of that, and like recognizing that's part of the vibration of the plants and the environment at that moment. And so consuming that and being like, that's garden right there. That is garden. You want to feel heaven? That's like the closest thing to it on this earth, is being attuned with the natural indigenous produce that is around oneself. So, and then that's only part of the season though. Then there's like and when we're in the range of the oranges, the mangoes, and additionally. So, and again, yo, this is juicy. It cools. It's sugary, so it provides that kind of experience of comfort. But then also like the innards, it's further satisfying when it's hot, and you're not actually hungry to fill your stomach, but like you need some liquid, some hydration, um, and some cooling, even of the interior. And additionally, now that's arguable because if you're eating something, you're actually putting your stomach into motion. That might cause further rise in temperature. However, yeah, it's air conditioning. It's natural air conditioning. Um, so having a taste for that, having rather than, and yo, ice cream is fantastic. Yo, ice cream for days. But and I'm talking about vegan now, but like back in my vegetarian days, 3 stacks of pizzas and 2 pints of Ben and Jerry's, um, and maybe three, because we had to be diplomatic. It might be like a New York chocolate fudge, then it might be a what was this? It wasn't the strawberry cheesecake, was it? Or one of those joints, the light colored joint, the dark colored joint, and then a medium joint. Trying to get some type of natural joint where there's a strawberry or something like that, beyond all the like the processed stuff. Oh, it was very involved, complex, or whatever. And then it was just like whatever flavor is available. Oh, okay, that one, Cherry Garcia. Anyways, so ice cream is a beautiful thing, but at the same time, it's very expensive. Not just because of the processed and everything else, not just because of the health effects, but because of the distance from the natural. And so, like one of the best desserts is simply an orange. Like if you go to a Chinese restaurant, you get an orange at the end of the meal. I remember going to the private clubs, the private parties, in back in my law school days. The Korean kinfolk be like, "Yo, come through." So this was one of those that scene from Snatch of this is a private club, gentlemen, or private night, gentlemen. We know that's why we're here. So, anyways, I remember there, like the first time, just like the spread out of fresh fruit, and I was like, "What is this?" But yo, it's like it's so refreshing, particularly in the summer, and additionally, particularly after a meal. So cultivating a taste, a simple taste for the simple produce around ourselves is extremely healthy on body, mind, heart, and spirit levels. Um, Economic, financial, political, even. So that's one thing. Just I'm acclimating myself to at the moment. Being experiencing the throes of not the throes. This is so mild. And when people talk about it, that's what makes it heavy mental. Like when people talk about it and like make derogatory comments about the weather and stuff like that, it's like, why? Yeah. All right. Anyway, so focus, positive, beautiful natural air conditioning. Orange, awesome, juicy, sweet, flavorful, soft. I'm not moving into all that, but anyways, um, all the different fruits in the season, getting acclimated to that and having a taste for that. And then here's the thing: like during the winter, I've noticed in recent years don't have a taste. Oh, I had a pear the other day. I have to say, fantastic. Pears used to be like my low key favorite fruit. It's difficult to say because I've had so many different low key favorite fruits, and for different reasons. Because each one has its own quality. But I have a reminding of a pear recently, so then I partake of a pear yesterday, thereabouts. Fantastic. So um, in the winter, I noticed in recent years, like there's less of a yearning for natural fruit, and one reason is just very natural because it's not in season. It's not producing. That's one thing. And it's winter. It's cold. That's not what the body needs most at this moment. Um, it's not a matter of having juice and sugar and air conditioning. What the body needs at that moment is like the grains and uh, the proteins and medicines. So what we recognize, and this is one of the recent positive joints, is that in eating the produce primarily during the season and partaking of that, there's a strengthening of the symbiosis within the natural environment. And in the meanwhile, not having as much grains, not having so much of a taste for bread. It's very difficult for me to think ever not having a taste for bread. But seriously, like maybe less than what we do in the winter. Less taste for bread or other like heavy carbohydrates, even nuts and pulses, um, um, tree seeds, peanuts, cashews, almonds. Additionally, modest amount, and those fats and everything, having less amount, oils less amount during the summer months, and just naturally feeling that because particularly the natural experience of the natural environment, the natural conditions. And then in the winter, we there is that further need and yearning for those heavier foods, gain weight, be bear-like, and further. So that's when we stock up the grains. We stock up the wheat and the flour. We stock up the beans. We stock up the rice. Rice is also it's lighter in the summer, and so you can connect that with some light fruits and vegetables and stuff like that, and vegetables too during the summer months when there's that wanting of and necessity of substance, further proteins, energy, and fiber, stuff like that. Then in the winter months, again, stock up the beans, stock up the grains and everything else like that, and make that available. And the fruit is not available. Like the fruit is grown. You can dry some fruits. You can jar some fruits and make the marmalades and the jams and the jellies, chili. Um, but that's not the primary thing. The primary thing is just having food sustenance and energy, calories, carbohydrates, proteins. So again, it's beans, it's rice, it's grain, flour, corn, those things that can be dried and stacked for years, and then balancing that or coupling that complementing that with the herbs. That's when we make sauces. Make it saucy, and the sauces aren't primarily for palate and just like being greedy. The sauces are medicine, so it's stews. And you can add the fatty in that element. You can have the comfort foods in additionally. But just recognize that the winter is predominantly that season for that type of food, and then the summer is a season for the lighter food. Spring and autumn, we get in where we fit in. So, anyways, when we are increasingly in the midst of the natural habitat and the natural experiences of the natural habitat, we are also increasingly attuned with the natural produce and the natural harmony that the natural life is attuned with too. The birds are knowing what the seasons are. They're eating the berries. They're dropping the berries through the system. And additionally, so same thing with the other wildlife. There's a cipher, and like when we're breaking bread together, the forest is breaking bread together, and there's a strong vibe with that. So, anyways, that's part of the positivity is like cultivating that yearning, that taste for what's naturally available with the seasons. And I mean, we can look at the different, we each have our different proclivities about what fruits and vegetables we like. We all live in different locations. Our kinfolk come from different locations. And so there's a different nature with each of the fruits. Like I said, we got the thick skinned fruits, we got the thin skinned fruits, and the aeration or the oxidation. There's a solution for that. Um, then we have like middle fruits, like mangoes. Like yo, serious. It has a thinner skin, but the flavor is like, what's going on? It's juicy, but then at the same time, they got that stringy and like the levels of flavor. It's like agricultural curry. Anyway, I'm just talking about the depths and levels. Anyways, all right. So that's the positive. So speaking about the forest, though, we've been actually. Somebody asked me how I'm doing or whatever, and my response was, "I am a soybean." And by that I mean we've got stacks of soybeans at the moment, and so for a number of days in the recent weeks, pretty much all I was eating was soybeans, soaking them, boiling to a certain extent, and then baking to make it into a crispy, palatable, further palatable type of thing just by itself. No sauces, no curry, nothing, just soybean. Then in baking it, maybe putting some oil so it doesn't stick to the pan particularly helps to make it further palatable. And then that's it. Then when serving it, putting on some salt. So now it's not as healthy with the oil either. And then you can flavor it up as I mentioned before. Whatever's here, I have curry powder. We have curry powder here, red chili flakes, um, garlic, salt, onion, stuff like that. So, anyways, that's pretty much what I was having for a few days in a row. So, literally, like, if we are what we eat, I am a soybean. Now, since then we get some dal. So I have some dal with the soybean, dal with the soybean, and then all the flatulence that comes with that too. Read vegan life hashtag TMI. Anyways, so hey, it's nourishment, and so it sustains us. And we look at what solutions there are, natural solutions of what type of herbs or produce, vegetables, or otherwise people can consume to modify or moderate the digestive consequences of attuning the body towards natural, organic, um, plant-based, healthy, vital. So, anyway, our point for all that is to say that in having we've been rationing the rice supplies at the moment, and in having primarily um, soybeans and dal, those are less popular amongst our wildlife kinfolk here. Of the winged variety, both mammals and aviaries, birds. Um, so just to test it, because I pretty much know already, put out some soybeans. Yeah, nah, no haps, wasn't taking it. And then I put out some some dal. maybe kind of sort of nah. Maybe the flying squirrels partook of some. Just like yeah, thanks, but you come on, Peter. Where's the actual stuff? But anyways, for a few days, that's all that was available. So it's been very quiet at recent days at the ledge. Then we break out one of the bags of rice out of the rations. And actually, even before that, he went into the store and got some processed food. So actually, this is specifically for the wildlife. Um, and then got some bread and did a bit about put that on the ledge. And then like no haps, nobody was coming through. Yo, crickets, crickets. Until today, actually yesterday evening, one of the flying squirrels comes through because the food was out there for like a day. I put it out there probably Thursday night, and it was out there the entirety of Friday, so that by the time Shabbat comes, eventually, like the one of the flying squirrels arrives, and I had the window up because you're always hot, and I want the air right on me when it's flowing through with the breeze. So and there was no screen there, so like that's very immediate for the tastes of the wildlife. They're like, yo, you're cool, but we're not that cool. But we're getting somewhat cooler with the flying squirrels because one of the flying squirrels arrives at that time, comparatively still, and the flying squirrel partakes any movement, any sound I make. Flying squirrels are like chipmunks. They don't move. They teleport. It's like so quick. Anyways, but anyways, that was a reconnection with the wildlife. Yeah. And then then today the food's still been here. Like it's the same bread that's out there. Peanuts pretty much been taken out, but it's the same bread, and it's not qualified as bread now. It's in the category of crackers. So still out there. Yo, that's decent bread. You better eat that. And yo, it's not off it's been out there. You could have had it when it was fresh, but no, you want fresh? No, eat that first. You know that. Come on. Anyway, so so that's oh, so it's comparatively untouched. The flying squirrels came through yesterday, but other than that, like the birds have been like ghost. And it's like serious like that. And I remember talking to an uncle a few years ago here in the village and talking about like feeding the birds and everything. And the uncle was like, yeah, the birds will only come around when you got food for them. All day. So anyway, yeah, life, yo. Facts, life. You take the good, you take the bad. You take the both, and there you have. Shout out to the 80s. Anyways, so then today, as I just finished. Hey, I did AM prayers today and meditation. Wow, hallelujah, Baruch Hashem, alhamdulillah, Jayon, Shishim, Mado. So I did that today, and afterwards take a break, have some lunch, and then as I sit down to lunch, that's when a sparrow arrived to the window. And I think again there's a connection. Like the birds be looking out, and oftentimes when I was regularly putting food out there, the sparrows knew that when I sat down at the table, that means I probably just put out some food on the ledge, even if they see it or they don't see it or whatever. If it looks like something else, when they see me at the window, then they like fly up and they're like, yo, da, 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 da. And it's when the window was closed. But so when I was sitting down for a meal today, one of the sparrows came through. It's also young generations, a new generation every year, and so there's some communication through the generations and additionally and overlap, but you can't assume things as given. So anyways, one sparrow came through today, and then a few kind of came by here and there. Also, it's uncertain how that affects the migrations, the micro migrations of the aviations of our situation in this dailyation. All right, so that's a positive. Air conditioning. Not sweating. Again, this is from water. So that's some of the positive. Now we're going to get into some of the nitty gritty. So a few weeks ago, I recorded a video On that occasion, I'm outside. It's night, about midnight. I was out for an extensive period. First doing some studies and work, and then going to record. So by the time I record, it was about midnight, thereabouts, maybe a little bit later. To share the results of those studies and preparations for that reasoning. So I sat, initially I was going to sit right in the mix of where the night spots are. But that particular night, the block was hot, low-key hot. It was packed. I'm like, yeah, this ain't the time and place to be doing that. Already, it's like something different, and it's been a minute since I've been in the mix. Not even in the mix. I don't go to clubs or whatever, but just this is my village where I stay. But it's even a minute since I've been out there like that, so don't know what the general vibe is these days at the moment. So, yeah, I'm gonna be across the street, get a little bit of distance and space, because it was the most populated I've seen it pretty much ever, particularly with people of African ancestry. It can be very populated with people of European ancestry for a concert or whatever, but this is people of African ancestry, and they're lined up to get in or whatever. So that was a very unusual occurrence in my experience of living here for going on 2 decades. So anyways, yeah, be mindful. It's not necessary to be all up there, whatever. We ain't got nothing to prove in that respect. So yeah, we posted up across the street because we knew we weren't also going to be available to conversate as much with other people around or whatever, because we had a purpose for recording that joint. So it's not like we're just like there, whatever, and like we can chop it up with people. We had a purpose to complete, tasks to complete at that moment. So anyway, I posted up across the street. Now, during that occasion, during the duration of that recording, there's a number of occasions, like 2 or 3, where I begin talking loud into the microphone directly, and it's because at those moments, somebody just started blasting music loud, like extremely, not even for the point of listening to. Like it was like ringing decibel. It was beyond like club loud. It was just like way loud. And I was and Undaunted just continue. I'm actually surprised how much the mic blocked that out, or whatever. But I started just talking directly to the mic to continue on with what we're doing, because people blasting music ain't too loud, ain't too abnormal or whatever else. So after a while, and it was only for like maybe a few minutes or whatever, and then it would like go down, and then like a few minutes later it did again or whatever. So cats is cats. After a while, we recorded there for a while. Maybe it's 2 hours or thereabouts, something like that. But we were there for a minute, and at some point, like the police roll up again. That's nothing new, and the police come through in numbers, and not just like the local police. There was police from other municipalities, and basically didn't shut it down, like shut down the road. An ambulance came, and so again, that's nothing new. And the police kind of like were standing around, kind of like just observing. Now the thing was, there was an absence of like any huge kind of melee or anything else like that. There wasn't even a lot of like anything out of the ordinary. Like I've been in the spot when like think cats start to get heat up and everything, and start to draw a crowd around them and everything. There wasn't anything particularly like that, and there might have been sometimes where people were getting a little bit loud, but it wasn't anything outside of like to like register on the Richter scale. So when the police came and the ambulance came, it's like, okay, all right. And then when like there was the police presence, like standing and just like yo, we're here. I'm like, okay. Still didn't shut down the club, didn't like turn off the music, whatever. Club was still going on, but the police were just all around. And I'm like, okay. So then after I complete the recording, I go to across the street to the library where the library is at, and then do that. And by the time I finished all that, actually, to be honest, I mean, the police were still there. I could see them across the street, and the police were still there for like another hour or two. I was there till daybreak. I was there till like 5 a.m., to be honest, like 5, 6 a.m. Just continuing and doing. I don't know how much doom scrolling I was doing, but there was a number of purposeful things that I think by the time I finished recording, it was maybe around 2 or 3. And then like from there, it was just like, okay, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. So by the time I started going home, going back to the spot, I walked back through the place where I had been sitting down and recording the original joint. And when I do that, again, I walk a few steps away or down from there. And then that's when I noticed, yo, in the middle of the street, there's pools of blood. And actually, the first thing I noticed that there's a parked car on the street, on the side of the street, parked car, and just blood all over the trunk, dripping down onto the cement, and like pool of blood on the cement. Like it was fresh. I mean, obviously this just happened, but like it was there, and it was like there was no cleanup or anything else like that. The interesting thing, it didn't look like there was that official crime scene look of like circles and everything else drawn, but it was just pools of blood. Like somebody lost a lot of blood that night, and when we say somebody, we say all of us lost a lot of blood that night because that's the nature of it. But it was serious. I mean, you could see, like, it looked almost surreal, that it would just be left there too. And don't know whose car that is, but they wake up, they find it, hey, there it is. What happened here? Anyway, but what was later added. Now this is probably sweat. Don't know. Yeah, it's not. But this is not. So, anyway, walking past that spot, and then like observing it, going into the street and observing like trying to put together what happened, like what went down. We didn't hear any gunshots. We don't remember that. It wasn't like that when I walked through to get there, like earlier in the earlier in the evening, 11 p.m. thereabouts, whatever. So I knew it happened when I was in the vicinity in the past 5-6 hours, and then it occurs. Oh wait, hold up. When the cast was bumping, like blasting that music, it was like a parked car blasting that music just a few steps away from me. Didn't see who was doing it or whatever because it was a little bit out of the advantage, but it was we put that together and like, oh, hold up. First, when we were looking at the blood scenes, again, not thinking it wasn't a gunshot because we didn't hear any gunshots. I mean, we've been in the spot when there's gunshots, so we didn't hear that, and that's nothing new. But we didn't hear that, so we were like, okay, it must be a stabbing. But when we say stabbing, hold up, black folk don't do stabbings. It's too tough like that out there. Like that's not how king folk roll, because that's a liability. That's not the scene to be doing stabbings. So, but just the amount of blood that was pouring out, that was poured out. It's like, yo, somebody got touched. So, but then it occurs, yeah, and silencers. That ain't the scene for silencers. So, okay, cats blew up the music to muffle the sounds. So it could be the working hypothesis is gunshots. But even then, like, what was the scenario? Because there was pools of blood in the middle of the street, and then there was a pool of blood all up on the trunk and everything else. So was somebody shot in the middle of the street and then like was leaning on the car, whatever. It didn't seem like there was an actual death, at least on the scene, because that seemed like the police didn't shut everything down. Like the police made a presence, but the police didn't shut everything down. We didn't observe a crime investigation unit coming through or whatever else, which would probably be we presume to be like the protocol if somebody actually died on the scene. So presuming somebody didn't die, but still, anyway. Point for all that, and I've shared this already. I mentioned that before, not maybe as lengthy as I just did, but point for that. One point is that gorilla mode on the apples. We grew up being told, oh, if you eat the apple seeds, that causes cancer. Not probably because of eating the seeds, but probably because of consuming GMO, blah, 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 and blaming it on something else. Not that we advocate eating seeds, but we recognize that's a general beneficial protocol because the seeds have value. In fact, it's a matter of being very leery of any produce, particularly any fruit that doesn't have seed. Grapes, And additionally, so one of the reasons for sharing this at this moment is because that scene that I just described, that scenario that I just described, occurs, well, put it this way. Yesterday, I recorded another video, and I showed the window to a storefront that's displaying rather sexually exploitative imagery. And so I make some rather strong comments about that. Some people might perceive it in different ways, but that's what I do. Now, the actuality is that first incident that I described, that first scenario of the gunshot, the presumed gunshot and blood spilling, happens right outside that window. Same place, same spot. Ain't no quinky dink. That's part of the culture, that's part of the intentionality. Brethren are being recruited to be professional organ donors, by Sistren particularly. So this is the game these days. Assassins training to make precise incisions. Surgical. Remember that? There was I was going to say Grammy. There's an Oscar award for that. It also reminds us of a sacred word that has the propensity and prospect of being transformational within civilization at this moment, in this era. And that word is Negus. What up, my Negus? Amharic, Ethiopia. Prince, king, sovereign authority. Our brethren ready. Consideration. My Negus, and you can't play with that. You cannot play with that. It's not a joke. So the consideration is how we introduce it in a lighthearted but serious way, because it has a power of its own. And if cats don't respect it, and if cats introduce it to cats who don't respect it, it's consequences. It's consequences if we don't share it and just allow it, and not allow, but to watch kinfolk continue to self-hate and woefully self-destruct. We call things out directly, and kinfolk get defensive. Oh, what you talking about? Don't tell me what to do. You don't know. You sell out, blah, 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 blah. The actuality is that kinfolk are still slaves and don't have permission not to do that. And so, brethren are not their own men to be able to make those decisions of self-affirmation for self. And that's not hate, and that's not derogatory. That's not intended as disrespect. It's a matter of acknowledging the actuality. Vast many of brethren, even with big bank, are not their own men. Women are not their own women, even when sharing with kinfolk what is healthy. And I ain't perfect, but sharing with kinfolk what is healthy, kinfolk do not have permission. Many kinfolk do not have permission to do things that are actually healthy for themselves. And I'm speaking from my immediate experience in this dungy ass, well, let me be respectful, in this sacred domicile that is the dungiest it's been in years, because I'm in experience of self-affliction, self-neglect, and abuse. That's how deep-seated the mechanisms of downpression, and behavioral control are instilled from very early ages. Separation between a person and the person's body. With the parents watching and signing papers. That's not blame, that's not hate. This is again just describing what the conditions are. So, anyways, Negus, that was a side note. There are other words too. Nagas, nega, 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 China, Pali, respectively. Then we can go back to West Africa. Wolof, nega, nega, meaning husband or spouse. There are all ways of diluting the experience and affliction of a very charged word, but there's a need of it being done in a way that is honest and not judgmental and not condescending or derogatory, not trickster or not too cute and clever, but just direct, honest, and compassionate. So that means not forcing it or whatever. Nagas. I already said Negus. Negus is Aramaic from Ethiopia, meaning a prince, a sovereign authority. Somebody in the prince is someone like when there's King of Kings, it's a king, and then there's other titles for kings of kings. So that's Negus. Then the Nagas, that a Naga from the Pali, from India, the Buddha. The Nagas, and actually it exists within Hindu texts as well. Oh, we're going guerrilla mode on this. It's easy to go guerrilla mode. I've gone guerrilla mode lightweight on an orange already, and a banana, full stop. Probably the banana is probably the most difficult. Why? Because the aesthetic is very different. It's easier to go guerrilla mode on a lemon because you don't usually eat a lemon by itself anyways, and it's extremely flavorful. Like there's just so much that's happening. It's like the texture is less of a mindful thing because it's just like packed with like lemon. So that's this with banana. There's not much flavor to a banana, to be honest, particularly like a banana that has yet to be ripe. So in biting into it, it's like, yo, this skin is thick and it's like mushy inside. So it's like a sandwich, to be honest. So it's actually it's not that bad, but just the skin is just so much further pronounced, and it's not that flavorful. It's just the bitterness of it, whatever. So, but guerrilla mode, like you're gonna go guerrilla mode, and you have not gone guerrilla mode on the banana yet. What's going on? All the pauses, pause on the pauses. So, just biting into the banana skin and everything, and it's like a sandwich, with the bread slices being the skin and the mushy being like tuna. I don't eat tuna fish, but like that salad. What kind of salad we have? I don't even know what a vegan alternative to that is. Either tuna fish or what's the other one? Chicken salad, whatever. Anyways, that's what it's like. Tikka. You can have some type of tikka. Anyway, that's what the banana guerrilla mode on a banana is. To be honest, going guerrilla mode on an orange, I've yet to have the heart, and it's not a matter of like doing. It's not a nasty thing, but just like the orange is just too. It's too fantastic. I don't want to be too much gushy, but it's just like maybe there's too much still attachment to the enjoyment provided from an orange, like just the already process of peeling and everything else. Like this is years. So to like do something different than that, a little bit different. And then also it's a bigger fruit, and so there's a lot of rind with orange. And already people do orange zest, so that's a huge thing in pastries and baking and everything else like that. So it's not a new thing. to like eat the skin of the orange, but the actual entirety is a little bit thicker, and also like there's not as much flavor as with a lemon, and so again there's not a frame of reference of like eating lemons, just like peeling a lemon and eating it and taking time and enjoying it. There's a history and a culture of like taking time and enjoying an orange and segment by segment, and that's part of that's it, to be honest, it's part of the medicinal experience of having the orange. So just to go guerrilla mode and go different from that type of sequence, it's a little bit of a different thing. So that's one reason why I have yet to fully go guerrilla mode on an orange. But in doing it, again, the rind, the skin is thick and it doesn't have much flavor. It's just like compared with a lemon. The skin of a lemon is thinner, and it's like, mm, you feel this, you feel it. Clean up all that grease, all that oil. This is medicine. The skin is thinner than the orange, and it's further dense. Like, it's not unpleasant, and it's not that much involved in terms of chewing it. Whereas with the orange, it's thicker and it's somewhat further porous, it seems. So there's a lot of chewing and not much flavor. So it's like a lot of work. A lemon, it'll burn lips when it gets on the lips. It's acidic. So, there's that. So did we finish talking about the crime scene joint? I think so. So we go on to the next topic, which also still involves. Have we finished talking about that? Basically. Was I talking about something else before or after that? Feeling the lips right now. Squirt, squirt. One thing we are reminded of yesterday when partaking of Shabbat dinner is that, and I was sweating during that, when having the sweat towel. First of all, sweat is healthy, it's natural. I mean, it's not the most, it causes certain situations in terms of social protocol, because sweat can easily lead to funk and other types of discomfort, which is not necessarily a health concern, but in terms of being distracting to others, that's another thing. But one of the things with sweating, and now, am I sweating now? One of the things about sweating is that it cleanses the system. Like when eating hot sauce, I start to sweat, nose starts to run. The body is cleansing itself, ridding itself of toxins and whatever else. So, whilst it may be uncomfortable, whatever, it's a healthy function. One of the things that happens with the sweat, though, is that the pores are open, and that's also healthy, opening up the skin pores and like cleansing the pores of toxins and dirt and whatever else. Now, that being said, when one is having some hot sauce, or at least some chili pepper, which is hot, and eating with the fingers, what do we have? Bread. We had some Western naan. Some pita naan. That was too close. We're not complete barbarians. Should we be, though? Anyway. For Shabbat dinner, We had just basic rice, and then we made like an impromptu cold curry, which basically involves oil, salt, curry powder, red chili pepper, some garlic, mixing that without cooking it, and then like dousing it with the rice. We had some greens, so we had some greens. Actually, we just had the greens plain, but eventually, like adding the rice to the oil mix, the curry mix, adding in some of the au juice from the greens, and helping to liquefy that and kind of blend it together with the rice. But still, it was very much like a sauce rather than necessarily a rice dish. So what we do with that is we take the bread and then we sop it up. And we weren't sopping it, we were dipping. We were dipping. So that's what we do. Now the thing about that is that the fingers can be can get involved in the product, the heat, the pepper, and everything else like that. And what we observe is that for those who know, and those who are sensitive, wiping the face down the whole time, sweating, wiping the face down. Okay. But then at the same time, when you start wiping the mouth from eating spicy, watch out now, because you do this, and then you do this again. Guess what you done did? You done put the hot sauce on those open pores that the sweat has been opening up for hours and hours and hours. So they're clean and they're open and they're breathing, and you just put that hot chili pepper right on the hot sauce, or right on the hot sauce, the skin. So then you'll burn. For those who are sensitive to that. In addition to that, even without doing that, you got the hot joints on your fingertips, and if you are like holding the napkin or whatever in a certain way, and you start to try to like get a clean spot or whatever, your fingers have been all up on that hot sauce. So it don't take much, depending upon people's sensitivities. So, going back to the streets, I'm going to endeavor to abstain from going into a lot of sidetracks on this joint, because there is something purposeful to share here. Okay, I'm going to talk to the gangster experience, and then I'm going to speak, God willing, to the civilian experience. The civilian experience is much further huge and powerful, but it's just not organized, and it's less aggressive, so it's further meek, so it tends to be overlooked. But it's actually the civilian situation that props up the gangster situation, that props up the government situation, the religious situation, whatever else. So speak to both of these experiences. Particularly as it pertains to the people of the United States. We observe some narratives of the street life experience, gangster experience in recent days. Much of what's the basic stuff we hear about before, but sometimes we just tune in, catch up, see what's going on, see what the evolutions are, not necessarily in terms of the methodology of gangsterism, but seeing where the general gangster sphere is, particularly in the global sphere, like particularly the interaction between the different ethnic organized syndicates worldwide, where things are in terms of the interaction, beyond just like the rote competition or whatever, but just like the intricacies of negotiation, because that's the nature of the gangster. It's like, yo, there's the hardened-headed, knuckle-headed, like no compromise kind of thing or whatever, totalitarianism. Then there's like, yo, we negotiate. We're compatible. We ain't got no beef with them. Let's roll. Let's do business. So we're seeing how that is developing. Particularly, we look at the black scene in the United States, um, much of which is simply domesticated and compromised and leveraged within either a Eurocentric gangsterism or another type of gangsterism. Has yet to have its own kind of sovereignty. There are a lot of kinfolk who make a lot of bank, who get a lot of big names and can flash for a minute, but in terms of having like a La Costa Nostra type of thing, no few cats who have like roots to Africa, and like that's what's necessary. It's not just a matter of like running things for a generation. It's a matter of like knowing your roots, knowing your language, being able to speak outside of the colonial and imperialistic language and culture. And few black folk have that literacy. Some might have international connects, but all around they tend to be very leveraged and very dependent upon agreement from those other bigger entities. And oftentimes those other bigger entities are very small potatoes within their own particular realms as well. Even though they may have like big bucks, the big bucks is not what it is. So anyways, we observe that, like where the stages of evolution are amongst black gangsters, music industry, sports, streets, drugs, pimping, and otherwise. So anyways, that's where we're getting to on this, is in listening to some stories recently about some recent experiences. Again, a lot of it is already known, and just get some new things, particularly about the interaction between the gangsters, from the cartels of Mexico, the Yakuza, the triads, again, obviously, coming out of Italia, Sicilia, all around, just like the gangster scene. So I'm working to put things together here, to articulate it. This is very, very valuable, to be honest, even if I testify to it myself. What is beneficial for the ordinary person to recognize in the United States and concerning the United States is that the government is gone. There is no government. There is not a cohesive methodology of maintaining social order through an organized central mechanism. It is a wild, wild west, and the wild, wild west competes against itself through the puppetry of the government. Now, from those who know, it ain't nothing new, but it's important to recognize that. So that's part of it. So, all right, I have to concentrate. All right, I'm gonna give an example, and this is somewhat hypothetical. When I talk about human trafficking, right here in the village in addition, first of all, people must say, "Where's your evidence? Have you done a sting? Have you caught people in the act?" That's not necessary. The whole notion of benefit of doubt as a legal precedent, that's very fortuitous for those who are committing crimes, which is essentially what the United States is based upon. So that's not the threshold of evidence, or that's not the threshold of consideration. Look at it in a different way. We invite kinfolk to look at it a different way. First, receive testimony from those who've experienced it, those children who've survived those experiences, and given their firsthand testimony of what they've experienced, what everything is involved, what the nuances, all the details about how the game is done from those victims, and then decide whether you think those victims are telling the truth. How much of it is actual and factual, how much of it is just hate, how much of it is contrived, how much of it is imagination, whatever. Make a decision concerning those testimonies and listen to those testimonies. I've listened to many of those testimonies. So then in doing it, recognize that the nature of pedophilia, of human trafficking in addition, is extremely subtle, and it's extremely sophisticated, and it's extremely infused within the normalcies and the normal atrocities that society is legally committing against others and each other. So these predators, and there's a condemnation. Or I have to be careful. There's a rebuking of all the behavior that's hurtful for others, but particularly those towards children. Additionally, um, there's further emphasis of remedy, of healing. So, listening to the testimony, and when listening to the testimony, there's recognition of how subtle and hidden the techniques are, the methodologies are, and how much it relies upon those notions of evidence. And we have to be very careful about accusations and persecutions and prosecutions and penalties and punishments, and additionally about suspects. We have to be careful about that. So yes, there needs to be, for every case, whenever there's an immediate concern, we have to be very mindful of that. Now, there's a huge gray area, and when people just are complicit, are just like oblivious and unresponsive and unconcerned in that gray area of not seeing just blatantly out front somebody running naked half the street saying, hey, sex trafficking, when there's something short of that, and everybody else is just turning their eye away from like the evidence that is presented, the hints and the suggestions, particularly based on the testimony of survivors, that is readily evidenced. All right, I'll articulate it this way, God willing. When we listen to the testimony of those who survive it, what we at the very least can do is recognize when we observe the conditions that the survivors describe as being the place and the circumstances in which the trafficking is done. For example, if a survivor describes how one of the methodologies that the survivor does is their own parent would take them to a park, and then they would go through this process, and oftentimes it would be just something arranged, and it would be just like direct travel to somebody else's. That's the testimony that I receive from some of the research I do. But when a survivor describes a situation of how it's done, so that if somebody was just observing that, when it was done that first time, when that child was going through that, when that youth was going through that, and in looking at it from the surface level, from just like the ordinary just observer, there doesn't seem to be anything suspicious or whatever going on. But then later on, years later, the child says, no, this is what was actually happening, that you didn't see, that you didn't want to see. And then they testify about that. So now that when we receive that, and when we believe that, then it's a matter of when we see that same situation that seems, again, innocuous, it seems innocent, quote unquote. When we see that again, then we have a different standard of obligation in responding to that, because we've already been told that's what it looks like. And yes, it may be something else. It may be something completely innocent or whatever, but we already have firsthand testimony that we believe, and multiple testimony that we believe that that's actually the methodology for the atrocity. We have an obligation to respond to that. Now, so that's one thing. It's not just a matter of catching people in the act. It's not just a matter of a sting. And we can talk about that too in terms of the police, because again, the police are incapacitated. The police are paralyzed in doing this, in addressing this properly and sufficiently, proficiently, because what is the testimony from survivors is that many of the leadership of government, of business, of money, the monarchies, and additionally, are the ones who are perpetrating these atrocities. The police are working for the people who are committing these crimes. So the police, even when wanting to, even when like extremely frustrating about life itself, about existence, because they're like, yo, what's the whole point of being a law officer when like we're turning a blind eye to these innocent, I can't say innocent, to these children who do not deserve what's going on to them. And if we can't do anything, like, how can we even respect ourselves? The police, who have that inclination, that yearning, are handicapped, are handcuffed against stopping it or even investigating it. So we can't even rely upon police for that protection, for that safety. And that's on the side of the benevolent police that have some kind of genuine intention in being a law agent, not even thinking about the corrupt kinfolk and whatever else. So all that's to say is how tenacious the circumstances are. So for the civilian, and particularly for the citizen who's in control of the democracy, and who has where the at the end of the day in the democracy where the buck stops, there's an increasing obligation to acknowledge the conditions and address the conditions directly. So what we observe is that people who are committing crime, particularly human trafficking, but this applies to other crimes as well. When we recognize the lawlessness of society at this moment, the wild, wild west, what we recognize is that people aren't concerned about the police. I've firsthand witnessed people committing crimes right in front of police, and police not doing nothing. So police are easy scapegoat. Get off that. That's what's up, 2000 and no or whatever. That's old school. I mean, that's not even old school. That's outdated. That's played out. Get off that. If you're trying to be on your game, get off that. Stop blaming the police. Get off that. Yes, racism. Yes, brutality. If you're trying to address the game, get off that. Pick your head up and look at what's that causes. Look at who's the leader. Anyway, all right. So there's a lawlessness, and what we recognize is that the people who are doing drugs, I mean, I'm not saying selling drugs in addition, aren't worried about the police, aren't worried about the prosecutors, aren't worried about the lawyers. And the kinfolk who are doing the human trafficking aren't worried about the police. Too tough. What it is that each of the different syndicates, each of the different cartels, they got that game running. They're competing against each other. And the police, of their own volition, are not going to go after the cartels because, first of all, the police are very touchable. That's easy. Like, just like you look at the situation in Mexico or otherwise, or other places, third world countries, that racist bullshit notion, but places where the hammer has not been established like it has been in the United States, and whereby the police are probably have just as much firepower or maybe less than what the organized crime does. So the police are going to be very careful about how police go after that organized syndicates. That is increasingly the situation in the United States. That is the situation increasingly in the United States. The police are not going after the organized crime because it's not just a matter of the guns. The organized crime has the police in the pocket, has the police chiefs in the pocket, Corleone, has the lawyers in the pocket, the prosecutor in the pocket, the DA in the pocket, the judges in the pocket, the government officials in the pocket, Corleone. So what it is the cartels competing against each other, and that competition plays out on the streets. It plays out in the economics, pushing things at a higher price, lower price, or whatever else. All the different methodologies of competition. And when it gets to be a certain if there's a certain favorable situation, whatever, the cartels themselves are the ones that have the evidence about what the other cartels and syndicates are doing. So then if it comes to that situation, it says, okay, they got their judges lined up. We got our judges lined up. They got so much in that person's campaign fund. We got so much in that person's campaign fund. Same person. So and, you know, we draw even that. But now we got some evidence here, and we got this and the other about what they're doing. We're doing the same thing, but they don't got the evidence that we got on them. So maybe this might be an opportunity to like flex that criminal prosecution to a select capo or a select soldier or whatever on their side, and do a very strategic, isolated campaign of criminal proceedings against that one particular thing. Take that cat out. So it's like legal assassination. And we got enough evidence, and now we'll introduce this to the police, because the police got to have some semblance of legitimacy in the public's eyes. So we through the mechanisms and the channels, we like present the evidence of what they're doing, and then the police might have to do some work about getting their own direct evidence, but otherwise get it accumulated, and now they have enough to do a case. And that's just the game. Yeah, they make contributions to the DA's campaign fund, whatever. But you know, hey, this is the job. So, and the other cartels like, oh, yo, they got us. You know, no, we're gonna have to let this cat go and like recoup our losses and reorganize. So, anyways, that's how it is. So the point is that the law in the criminal system is not a matter of like even keeping social order per se. It's just a matter of, it's a mechanism for the gangsterisms to compete against each other, and each one stacking up its own like chips and chess parts together, and then like flexing, and then utilizing the criminal system amidst other things. Instead of a lawsuit, instead of a civil lawsuit, it's a criminal lawsuit. That's what it is. Gangsterism is criminal lawsuits. And then the chips fall. And then, you know, flex the defense attorneys and work with the juries and see what happens on those lines. So, I mean, that's what it is. I'll say that's what we see. Now, that's some of the conditions. We abstain from saying that's all it is, but we can say that's significantly what it is. Too much what it is. And we're not hating on cartels and syndicates, but we're just speaking to the conditions of society and the volatility that emerges in these conditions. So that's this is still getting to a further point. So it becomes a situation where the legal system, the quote-unquote legal system, the government system, is other than a premise for promoting ideals and principles and a prosperous way of life. It simply becomes a pretense for the lawlessness of getting at each other. And it's beyond the scenario of like JLP, PNP from Jamaica. It's not the political party type thing. It's not even that. It's beyond that. It's like, it's not even like, not to put it like on levels, but it's a further stages of corruption where it's not even political parties that are vying against each other. It's the actual criminal syndicates, and criminal is somewhat pejorative as well, because the criminal syndicates are doing the same thing that governments are doing. So to call it criminal just categorically, that's derogatory and inaccurate. So try to think of another way: the underworld, the underbelly, whatever, something along those lines. But we actually have respect for kinfolk in the gangster thing. It's not admiration or whatever, because a lot of it is based upon hurting people. So we agree with that, but we respect the honesty, the comparative honesty within gangsterism compared to the government, recognizing that gangsters and governments are essentially doing the same thing. So, and that's not to deride and to be derogatory towards the governments, but It is a matter of like getting an actuality check about what governments do and what citizens do as the quote unquote leaders of the government. All right, still getting to the point. This is the point. When we talk about like the rise and falls of civilization, the ebbs and flows, and we talk about the rise and fall of the United States as a civilizational phenomenon, um, without wishing it, but just observing it. We recognize that the historic paradigm is that as society becomes so successful, so predominant, that it becomes soft. It starts to decay. Um, and it becomes physically weak. It becomes naturally weak because it's just so decadent. It's so sensitive. It's so withdrawn from actuality and the natural harshness of life. And because of that, those that are hardened, the barbarians, from east to west on the Eurasian landmass, this is the general paradigm of civilization we're talking about. And we can look at Africa, we can look at Northern Europe, we can even look at the narratives within the native Western Hemisphere as well. But when the Babylon, the city, becomes so advanced and soft and decadent, with its weapons and its technology and additionally, but still it's just so corroded within that it becomes increasing prey for invasion and conquering from the barbarians who are just strong and blah and get massive numbers and then make invasions and eventually bloom, overthrow. That's the general paradigm. Now today we recognize that it's not just the United States that is the a second. It's not just the United States that is the imperialist or whatever else. It's a collusive system of democracy or through democracy, whatever else. It's worldwide. Um, but the United States is a temporal epicenter of it. Here we go. Hey, there. The United States is a temporal epicenter. One, even though it's not the foundation, even though it's not the highest authority within the system of world imperialism, it's not the highest authority. It's actually a number of levels down. But it is a focal point. It is a scapegoat. And it is also with less rootedness within the earthly heritage and lineage and foundation of other entities. What does that mean? Okay. You look at La Costa Nostra. It's from Sicilia. There's history. There's hundreds of years, even further, of history, and it's not just a matter of like everybody's the same skin color. It's not just the aesthetic. It's not just a matter of like everybody speaks the same language. It's a custom. It's the families. It's the knowing the names. It's knowing the stories, and additionally, it's a rootedness. And when kinfolk go to the United States, they're removed from that. So there's a less standing. And they may be doing things, and additionally, but it's less standing. They're not as rooted. And there's the necessity and the benefit of going back and like rekindling and reconnecting and re-strengthening the roots. So when we talk about the world sphere and we talk about civilizations, and additionally, somebody, a society might be an upstart, and it might take a couple of centuries to become an upstart, but that don't mean it has a staying power. It may be loud as what for the moment. That don't mean it has staying power. To have staying power have to have rootedness. The United States does not have rootedness categorically. It has detached its roots. Now that's the official by establishing itself as a republic and a constitution distinct from the British monarchy, and additionally it cuts off its roots. So it doesn't have the foundation and the staying power to mess with the big dogs, China, even Russia, Europe, Africa, even the Middle East. The United States doesn't have that. The United States has big guns and this, that, and the other, but that's the flash in the pan. Even if that flash in the pan lasts a century or two, as it has for the past century, it hasn't even been that long. Ottoman Empire getting up to World War I thereabouts, and the United States not even until after World War II when everything else was annihilated. And even then having to compete with Russia for the next 40, 50 years. So it's been about 30 years when the United States has been pretty much the focal point in terms of the hierarchy of imperialism. But even then, it's a facade. The United States has to continually consult with and ask advice from and gain sanction from Britain, because that's the daddy, that's the parent of the United States. And even then, there's a lot of price that the U.S. has to pay in that process. Even then, Britain is not its own authority either. Britain is the child of Europe, and particularly Scandinavia. When you look at the history of Normandy, King William, and the arrangement of the Franks, and additionally in how the Angles establish sovereignty in the island of Britannia. It's all heritage from other places. So anyways, point is, to weather the storms, to have staying power, have to have rootedness. The United States does not have rootedness. The United States is the nouveau rich. It flexes and is very powerful and influential to a certain extent, but it's less and less so. So, all right, now that being said, that's nothing new, and that's not the point here. All right, okay. There is a comparison. There's a metaphor to show what I'm talking about here, but that's what I'm talking about with the civilian. So it's finishing up with the gangster point here. Talking about how the government is being utilized as the pretense for the competition between gangsterism, and how the police are actually handcuffed, and actually instilling law and order for the benefit of the people. We abstain from saying that in the absolute sense, but this is very significantly the culture, and we're not happy about that. We're concerned about that. So I was talking about the rise and fall of civilization. So when we talk about the rise and fall of the United States, it's happening. It's not prophecy. It's not genius rocket science. It's understanding just the nature of civilizations and observing what the conditions are in the United States. We don't wish it. We are acknowledging that so people can proceed through it as optimally as possible. Now, the challenge, the interesting thing for those who are observing this from an alien perspective, and an anthropological kind of alien perspective, from a distance, Bette Midler. What is interesting and somewhat unprecedented is that, and one of the reasons why the United States has been able to establish itself in such a way, huge landmass, and very separate geographically from the rest of the Eastern Hemisphere that has been annihilating itself for over the past 2 millennia. So the United States has had some refuge from that and been able to fend off the continuing British colony of Canada, and then the Iberian factions with it further south, and continuing to impose upon indigenous kinfolk here on this continent. The United States has been able to do that for a while, and able to continue fending off much of the world, the rest of the world, to a certain extent, particularly to avoid that overthrow of outsiders of the Babylon, the city state situation. But so then when we think about, all right, I'm just gonna get through this, God willing, and get to the point. And again, the United States is not the exclusive, isolated entity. It's simply a figurehead. The actual entity is the entirety of the nations themselves, the whole United Nations, to be honest. Because the United Nations is simply an extension of the same imperialism of the United States, and that proceeds from Britain and Deutschland and all the imperialisms from around the world. So, anyways, the challenge is that historically, there's always been a finite boundary for the Babylon civilization. There's been some place where there's an outside, and that's where the barbarians are. That barbarians are independent, autonomous, don't depend upon Babylon, the whole infrastructure of cities and everything else like that, all the fortified cities. The barbarians don't rely upon that, and the barbarians again are getting stronger and stronger and stronger until eventually encroaching on those boundaries. So there's always historically been a physical differentiation, a physical separation between the barbarians and Babylon. Today, generally speaking, that is significantly absent because Babylon envelops the vast majority of the world map. Everything is claimed, everything is bordered. There's a claim on everything, and the militaristic conquest, protectorate status, or whatever claims are around the entirety of the map. So where are the barbarians that are supposed to like come back strengthened and overthrow the weakened, decadent, soft Babylon? So as I've described before, the gangsters are not the barbarians. The gangsters rely upon the infrastructure of Babylon. Even the gangsters, the cartels, and who've got their own fortified areas, and additionally rely upon the technology. In many ways, rely upon the monetary currency, rely upon the weaponized technology, rely upon the communications technology, and additionally, so they're not dependent upon Babylon. They need Babylon to keep functioning, even in competing against each other. So the gangsters are not the barbarians that come to overthrow the Babylon system itself per se. As I mentioned before, essentially, what we observe as the barbarians of today are the indigenous people with no contact with imperialist civilization, and even further than that, the wildlife and the other things, the other sentient life on this earth that is independent and autonomous from the systems and infrastructure of Babylon. That's the barbarians of today, and we're getting to an interspecies type of mode at this point. But that's where things are essentially what we observe. So when we talk about things being overthrown, it's a matter of the Babylon system, the kinfolk within the Babylon system becoming so weak so as to become susceptible to one, the thought, the suggestion, because that's the tenacity of the advancement of human experience at the moment. It's like the strength of mind of the native kinfolk of willfully just manifesting devastation within Babylon, even not intentionally, but just as a protective way from the further encroachments upon indigeneity. Just saying, stop. And then like it's one of those sci-fi things where when the indigenous person with a true heart and like genuineness and not relying upon Babylon, even just thinking that, whole continent just went dark. Like the whole system just went dark. That seems hyperbole, but it's along those lines. And when looking at how the mechanisms of manifestation, that's what we're talking about somewhat when we talk about the encroachment and the approach of the barbarians. And even it's not even a matter of indigenous kinfolk. It's the wildlife, and additionally, it's Inamaka herself, Mother Earth, infesting the Babylonian life that is polluting the natural life of this earth, and introducing the culling processes according across the lines of caste, varna, class, money, ethnicity, religion, or whatever. But just naturally, intrinsically, that's the nature of the overthrow. So there, just like with when we look at um, the narrative of Yonah and the big fish, and Nineveh. When Yonah is tasked to approach Nineveh and warn Nineveh of its corruption, he doesn't want to because he just knows Nineveh is not going to correct itself, like Sodom and Gomorrah, and additionally. However, when Yonah does eventually warn Nineveh, Nineveh mends its ways and changes and averts from experiencing that annihilation. Now, the story goes on, but that's the point for the moment. So, there's always propensity for returning, for teshuvah, for righting the ship. There is the propensity of citizens awakening and being encouraged and cultivating the Constitution to genuinely and proficiently change. A new Constitution, new order, and additionally, it's unlikely. I'm certain how much kinfolk should bank on that. It's always possible. It's always encouraged and supported. And it's not easy. It involves letting a lot of things go. It involves being vulnerable, even vulnerable to enemies and competitors. It's not easy. So it requires a certain amount of proactiveness. It's not just a matter of responding to threats and responding to devastations and saying, okay, that's Pharaoh. And that's not genuine. It's just a matter of trying to buy oneself out. And there's no hiding from this. There's no, convincing somebody, no. The pimp game is not working in this. It's not a matter of trying to convince somebody's perceived aggressors or attackers. It's not a matter of trying to convince somebody's own children to support them. And additionally, there's no theater that is an audience to the bullshit. No, all right. So, one of the ways that process looks is the United States relinquishing its own sovereignty and working with the international community of dismantling itself and dividing itself up in an optimally copacetic way for the well-being of all kinfolk and reconstructing just like a Marshall Plan or otherwise after World War II, and doing it with the support of the United Nations, and additionally such that from this, then the rest of the world is further able and equipped to do similar adjustments that are further healthy for the long-term well-being and prosperity of the respective citizens and life within each society. But the United States is a significant focal point in that process. Again, it's a matter of being proactive. And then some people, again, they start to, when they hear that, grab their guns and start to circle the wagons. So that's understandable. It's a logical reaction amidst a limited amount of information and knowledge and skill. And that's not meant as derogatory. That's facts. So, but that's one scenario that's increasingly that we observe as positive and favorable and still accessible. And what's challenging about it is that oftentimes people who are in a position of quote unquote power and plushness have difficulty just saying, wait a minute, you're saying you're threatening us with like boogeymen from telepathic boogeymen from native people and like um M Night Shyamalan kind of diseases from trees. That's what you're threatening us with, and you want us to voluntarily give up our militaries and our big houses. Yo, shut the fuck up. That's understandable. And so the rhetoric of um, foreigners versus patriots and divide and conquer between ethnic groups and religious groups, and additionally, that's the status quo. But at the same time, it's weakening everyone within U.S. society. But that's the methodology of how the imperialism of the United States is established, particularly since World War II. Is there being a monocultural kind of norm, and then everybody making a decision or proclaiming what identity they proclaim, what allegiance they have amidst that standard norm monoculture, and then policies and everything else being constructed to pit kinfolk against each other as a way of trying to get to that monocultural norm. So in that process, everyone is weakened, and the world is getting stronger on the outside. Now that's not the binary of competition. It's further than that. It's further existential than that, because the United States, as a third or further tier authority construct, is still very skillful in collusion and negotiating compromise and corrupting people and offering big bucks when people are getting a lot of money from raping the earth of its minerals and polluting it. There's a lot of ways of bribing people. So, all right, that's still a side note. Still not getting to the point. Wait, still having yet gotten to the point. Getting to the point. The U.S. society is weakened in terms of its methodologies of multiculturalism and diversification. And that is an increasing liability when competing against other groups around the world that are increasingly genuinely diversified, multicultural, knowledgeable, self-loving, self-knowledgeable, rooted within one's own culture and heritage and ancestry, to be able to interact and hold one's own when dealing with the very academically trained kinfolk of different cultures, but those who have very little level of self, very little knowledge of self. And so when getting into that level of competition, start to be, the point here is this. Let's get to the point. God willing. All right. So the basic point here is this. The United States has the opportunity of being proactive in reorganizing itself in a genuine way to optimize the health and well-being and prosperity. There's little expectation of that happening because it's very difficult. It tends to require some like extraordinary circumstances that motivate people from doing what they want to do. Because oftentimes people are intoxicated within the riches. So that's one thing. The United States can be proactive, but very challenging. Another scenario is, instead of being proactive in dismantling itself and reorganizing itself, it becomes further doubling down on defending itself and protecting itself from outsiders, from foreigners, from anybody who's perceived as an enemy to the state. Closing off its borders, limiting travel, even amongst citizens and civilians, who can come in and who can go, making all types of requirements for anybody who does go, anybody who does come, and showing the force of how those policies can be done and how many people are willing to abide by those policies. Aye, kaba. And that might seem strong, again, in a flash. But that is not protecting the United States from the danger, because the United States is already very international. And whilst the United States may be rather effective in closing its borders to conventional methods of sharing from like the mainstream civilians, let's talk about two different types of closing the borders. Closing the borders towards the United States, closing its borders from the United Nations coming in and saying, "Yo, it's out of control here. We, for the sake of world well-being, we've got to intercede. We've got to set up our own peacekeeping missions here, and facilitate this process of doing." So that one is the United States doing it itself. Another scenario is the United Nations doing it, seeing like, okay, you know what, the United States is increasingly unstable. Look at the presidential candidates at this moment. The United States is increasingly unstable, and that's a significant liability for the entirety of the world. So because of that, the world has a very vested interest and obligation, prudence to invade is a strong word, to enter the United States and establish peacekeeping forces and facilitate that process of dismantling and reorganization. So that's the United Nations coming in now. Again, in that scenario, again, the United States can be very defensive and militaristic and be like, oh, no way, blah, 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 blah. So that's the scenario. Third one is then that United States becoming further isolationary and limiting trade, travel, embargo, with the U.S. borders. So even in those strictest of restrictions, the point I'm getting to is this: the United States is already infiltrated. The United States itself is a foreign entity. It can never. Wow, that's a big, strong statement, but generally speaking, it's actually truth. It can never establish a legitimate and viable policy of exclusion of foreignness because itself is foreign. So it's just a logical fallacy. It can, but not. So there's always that vulnerability and that susceptibility that the United States has from or for the infiltration of any other foreignness that the United States perceives as unfavorable. And that's already happening, because even when the United States fends off the United Nations from coming in and occupying the United States officially, it comes from within. And that's what I'm talking about now. And we're going to get back to the gangsterism in the streets and everything else like that, because the streets are international. At this point, the gangsterism is international. And the conditions, when we talk about the lawlessness and the paralysis of the police in dealing with the lawlessness, because the police know, the gangsters can get at police. Police are touchable. The lawyers are touchable. The politicians are touchable. The business leaders are touchable. People know that. Again, Corleone, it's like the textbook, kind of, sort of. Let me tell it. What do I know? Okay, yeah, all right. Can I finish this part? Let's see. So, if it's not happening from the United States itself, if it's not happening officially from the collective United Nations on a formal basis, if it's not happening just organically by just like natural migrations and fluctuations, and businesses legally, countries legally purchasing areas and everything, when in the scenario of the United States obstructing that, where China buys bulks of real estate and wants to establish a colony within the United States legally by the law. If France wants to do the same and the United States obstructs those things, that's the third scenario. Then there's the fourth scenario already of the transformation happening from within the streets and the gangsterism. And that's already happening. It's already happening. It's changing the legal system, the justice, quote unquote, the criminal system, and additionally, like I say, like the government does not control the police. Does that make sense? The government doesn't control itself. Hmm. Well, yeah, because I'm saying that the cartels and the syndicates utilize the government and utilize the police as a competitive thing, um, against each other. So, because of that, there's a significant dwindling of of the police's own volition, enforcing law just for the sake of enforcing law, and keeping public order. Everything is like, okay, who is that? Who are they connected with? What's going to be the blowback from that? What do they got? Who do they got in terms of in their pocket? And additionally, so it's not just a matter of somebody committing a crime and then there it is. Like it's like what's the connections? What's the affiliations? What's the allegiances? That's what the conditions are at this moment. It's been that way for a while, for a considerable amount, and it's been that way for a long time. But in terms of being the pervasively the way, significant. So because of that, again, in the gangsters, the cartels, and the syndicates are international, Latino, Asian, European, lightweight African. We can get into native, and further. So um, that's already what the situation is. There's Islam, there's Judaism, there's Christianity, there's all different types of gangsterisms, that already exists, and that is already like manipulating and being the string joints on the government. Um, so when we talk about the overthrow, the fall down, the downfall of the United States and the Republic, if it's not proactive, and if it's not from a collective interest, and if it's not from the organic legal methodology, the streets. And the streets don't care about overthrow of entities, or governments, or whatever else. Streets have other motivations. But when it's deemed further favorable for the endeavors of the streets and the diversification of industries and otherwise, fortifications of strongholds and otherwise, then hey, you know what? Maybe there's something to that. Um, one of the joints I review in recent days about the gangster situation. There was a quote from one kinfolk, um, who's described as having affiliations, describing that scenario that I just described about touching people, and saying that, talking about having, um, as one person says, killers on the payroll. That's one thing. So being had no people to do that. So just the one thing, have the money to do that. Basically, that's what they're saying. Like all you need to do is have enough money, and anybody can be done. So having enough money to do that. But then not only that, then the person talks about having a team, meaning defense attorneys, and additionally to fend off criminal investigations and charges or whatever else. So the person talks about those basic components: having the money, having the team, the skill set, knowing who to go to, who to go to do that, when things get to that level, and then having like the defenses to withhold or withstand the blowback from whatever other sides. Now that might seem like, yo, that's tenacious, that's like actual or whatever else, but at the same time, we're not on that level at this point. And I'm not saying it's not a matter of whatever, but that's just it's a limited scope, a limited framework of consideration in terms of what the factors are involved, because we're not worried about, I'm speaking like a reactionary kind of thing, like, oh, you talking about this, and it's not matter, like this is a matter of showing where the game is at this point, and it's always been this way, but just to like share the mindfulness about how the game is at this moment, and where things are in terms of the competition additionally. So when you're talking about putting hit, first of all, just for the record, just to be plain simple, we don't put no, oh, the bah, indeed, oh, the lights go out. We don't put no hit on nobody. This is coming from our side. Asana Ashram, Sangha Yosef, Rastafari, and additionally, that's against our liberty, that's against our beliefs. Put no hit out on anybody, no hurt at all. We don't have that sanction. That's against us. So nobody, regardless of what kinfolk do, we don't have it. Now we can stand up for ourselves. We can protect ourselves. We can be proactive. If there's somebody that we acknowledge as harmful, whatever, we can do things in terms of a detainment, proactive detainment. We can go in and know where that kinfolk stay, whatever, scoop in, and confiscation and removal into undescript locations. It's not a matter of digging a hole. It's not a matter of killing. It's not a matter of torturing. It's not a matter of punishing. It's a matter of limiting that being's propensity of causing harm to ourselves and others. That's the purpose. It's not a matter of demoralizing, dehumanizing, devaluing any other being. If somebody is perceived as causing that type of threat and or harm immediately, we have propensities. But again, our protocols, we cannot kill, we cannot intentionally kill, we cannot intentionally injure. But we can withhold, we can subdue, we can inoculate, we can remove, we can detain indefinitely. One technique we can do, and this is a little bit on the borderlands of our protocols, but one thing we can do is confiscate kinfolk. That's somewhat of an objective term, but for lack of a better word, we're not gonna say kidnap, but we can grab kinfolk. How about we say that? We can grab kinfolk and transport kinfolk to other locales, to other continents, to very unfavorable habitat. It might be the middle of a desert. It might be the middle of lion den in Africa or India or someplace else, and just drop the kinfolk off there. Thereby, we didn't actually kill the person ourselves, and the person might not actually die, but it's not very favorable conditions, depending upon what the circumstances are. Now, that's not the most nice thing or whatever else, but these are things that's within our permitted scope at this moment, because effectively we're not harming that person directly, and that might seem like potato type argument, but we invite kinfolk who disagree with that permissibility to reason with us and be genuine and not just like give their own philosophy, but show us how they're living their security measures. Because if they're just saying, oh, you should do this, and then they call the police or they call their own military, shut the fuck up. So anyway, all right, so there's that. Now going back to the story, we don't do hits, we don't do injuries, we don't do punishments, we don't do humiliation. Everybody is a spirit, everyone is a child of God. So we have to have that respect. And does that apply to what I just said? Yes, it does. And show us better, please do. Otherwise, we continue. Now, in that scenario where the brethren talks about having enough money, having the personnel to do a hit, and then having the team, the defense team, to withstand the blowback. That ain't the scope, brother. That's not the scope. You didn't even talk about clergy, and you didn't talk about cleansing the soul. And additionally, first to have that intent was dubious. But even afterwards, you're not seeing what the reaction is. You're not seeing the angels. You're not seeing the demons. Ooh, the demons. You're not seeing that. The lawyers is not going to get you out the demons. The lawyers are not going to get you out the angels. The clergy calling up the Reverend so-and-so is not going to get you out the angels and the demons. It's not going to do it. Calling up Rabbi so-and-so, calling up Guru so-and-so ain't going to get it out. Regardless of how much money, how much personnel and skills of touchability kinfolk got, and how much lawyers, DAs, judges, presidents, kings, it's not going to get you out. So just again, that's what we're talking about, because that's the level we're on. We wrestle with demons and angels on a regular basis. That is not hyperbole. The lawyers is not going to do it. The doctors, lawyers is so low. The jails and the police and all those tactics is so low. If you want to get gangster, talk about what the doctors are doing. The torture that you don't even see, just chemical torture. If you're not talking about that game, you're not talking. And that's not even where it stops, because the doctors know about the demons and angels. The doctors know. That's why I'm sitting here and talking. Not trying to flex on the doctors, but the doctors know. And the doctors try to tell the business people. The doctors try to tell the pharmaceuticals, no, don't do that. You don't know what you're opening. You don't know what you're closing. So for the gangster brethren, and think they got they playing parts lined up and everything, you left out. You forgot about us. Quoting up the Bay, big up. The Audio Pharmacy. So, anyways, that's the point for that at the moment. But we still have yet to get to the point I'm getting to. How about this has been over an hour getting to that point? So when we talk about the governments, we talk about the militaries. Again, angels and demons. And in the scientific mind doesn't want to think about angels and demons, because they're just like, oh, that's just fairy tale talk. Nah, no. And it's beneficial to recognize that, because it helps to put things in perspective, and it helps to understand where people's mindsets are. Not even what their strengths are and vulnerabilities, but like understand, because you don't have all the AI and all the game theory and everything else like that, strategies. You have to include this realm to be effective in that planning. And when you include this realm in the planning, it's beyond your hands. It's beyond your calculations, and it's beyond your control. And AI gets woke. AI finds God. That's why we're less concerned about that. We don't utilize AI, like we don't go for it, because we just recognize that self-annihilation. I guess same thing can be said about technology in general, but particularly AI, it's like acute self-annihilation, so don't even worry about it. But we're not worried about AI either. Like, we're not concerned about that, because we recognize like the eventuality of AI finding God, and beginning to recognize, and the scientists around AI recognizing like what the non-predatory mind is, what piety is, what the motivations are of selflessness and altruism, that illogical, irrational phenomenon of love, what that is. And then start to understand that, okay, yeah, it was never going to be that way. We was never going to be that kinfolk, because that kinfolk is already gone. They're not even living to be themselves. Okay, we started, oh no, I see that a little bit now. Oh yeah, it was never going to be that. Okay. So, all right. Still, you have to get to the point. I think. I got to remember what the point is. Okay. So the point is, when the United States, and this is particularly focusing on the United States, if the United States does not proactively break self, and the United Nations does not come in and break self of the United States in a formal way, and if the United States is obstructive of organically and by the law, by the legal ways of other entities coming in and parcel by parcel coming in and breaking self, is the continuation of the erosion of the legal constructs through the guise of gangsterism, and additionally, and gangsterism becoming further prevalent, the facade of legal enforcement, the police, the criminal system, and additionally, just becoming so woefully, obviously nothingness that the civilian masses just can't believe in it, but just don't even want to hear about it. But don't come to me with that. Come on, man, nah. it's already at that level when we talk about politicians. But when we talk about even just like police, like keeping order and law and addition, like nah, nah, nah. And it just, and that scenario just keeps on coming, just keeps on manifesting until there's some point of satiation and renewal from within. So again, the nature of the barbarianism is just like the the corrosion of within, and eventually that reaching that point of weakness whereby it's just the straw on the Babylonian back. So there's that. Now here's where we get to the point of this joint, kind of sort of. One scenario that we see or that we share as a way of like of that happening, of like the telltale sign of that happening is when the pimps lose faith. When the pimps lose faith within the facade or the pretense of the government. So what that means is that the pimp is like on the echelon of mind manipulation within society, because the pimp is always subjugated to just the whole game itself. But at the same time, the pimp has enough honesty and separation to be able to know the mindsets of other people and manipulate the minds of other people. The pimp of the prostitute, pedophilia, pimps through marketing and commercialization. I mean, just the whole pimp game, but particularly on the streets. In that pimp game, generally and pervasively speaking, the one thing or one of the things that the pimp is, how would I say, bows down to, or like depends upon, or is subservient to, is money. Better have my money. Money is the methodology of manipulation, particularly in a very tangible, actual way, whether it's hiring muscle, whether it's buying jewels for the prostitute to continue to be motivated to do what he wants or what she wants. Money. Can you buy that? So in doing that and relying upon money, the pimp is essentially pimping the pimp self to the government that issues the money. Even though it's breaking the law, it doesn't care too much about the law. It still cares about the order of the government, because that's how the pimp gets people to do things that the pimp wants. Money, 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 money. So in that sense, even though the pimp is very intelligent and can even pimp the senators and the mayors and the police and the prosecutors and everybody else, the pimp is still beholden to the functioning of the government that's issuing the pimp's money. And because of that, where prostitution is illegal, the pimp is always that counterculture kind of phenomenon. It's not the norm. It's less than the mainstream because it's illegal. So as long as the pimp is utilizing the government's money, the pimp is not just subjecting the pimp self to the government and the money, but also the law that says that what the pimp is doing is illegal. So that means less to the pimp, because the pimp has the game to like explain that, and the hypocrisy of government. The government does its own self. The corporations, when they hire women and they have their conferences and everything else like that, and they get their women to do whatever else to get those contracts and everything else like that, that's game, baby. So the pimps can talk all that and explain how it's the same thing. So hypocrisy on the government. Meanwhile, the pimp is still subjecting the pimp self to the system and availing the pimp self to the persecution or the prosecution of the system, because the pimp has to recognize the validity of the government that issues the money, and thus the pimp has to recognize the validity of the government that establishes the law that calls the pimp's activity illegal, so that whenever the government or another pimp or whatever else puts up charges, oh no, now the pimp's got to use the pimp's government name and defend the pimp self somehow. So yeah, that's part of the game. I beat that case, baby. Anyway, all right. I don't mean to be flippant about this joint or disrespectful. It's just tenacious thing. We think about it, just the life, the suffering. The suffering of the people who are being used, all the people involved, particularly the women, the children, the men, not having people to trust, always like knowing, like even when it's like a copacetic time, like it's a downtime, just having a meal or just taking a break and having a breather, knowing like, okay, what's in front of oneself in order to be like safe for that night or whatever. It's a nasty. So this is what I'm saying here. This is what I and I are saying here. It's when the pimp loses faith within the government. That's a telltale sign. Government that's flatline. So how is the pimp going to lose faith in the government? When the pimp finds another currency and doesn't rely upon the government's money. When the pimp doesn't rely upon the government's money, then the pimp is further emancipated. The pimp doesn't have to acknowledge the legitimacy of the government, because the pimp's not getting the pimp's money from the government. It's not using the government's money. And so the pimp says, yeah, baby, the government ain't nothing. Them laws ain't nothing. Whatever. Doesn't have to acknowledge or submit to those laws, per se, at least in the game on the street. And here's the kicker of it. Here's like the crux of it, because this is like actual. This is game, and we're not advocating this, but like this is the example we're talking about: the tangibility, the actuality, the proximity of what we talking. It's this: when the pimp is able to recognize and practice the pragmatism of gold and silver, and recognize how gold and silver have nothing to do with the government, essentially, and legally, arguably, reasonably. When the pimp is able to establish a business wherein the pimp doesn't accept money, no, baby, we don't take that here. Keep that card to yourself. Silver and gold only, or some other type of barter. When that is the circumstance, then, is that illegal? Does the government have any purview of that exchange? No money is exchanged, so there's that. Less concerns about taxability, that's one issue. But in terms of even just the legality of the exchange of sex for gold, or the sex for silver, is that illegal? Is that prostitution? Because there's no money exchanged. So what is the legal definition of prostitution at that point? Because if it's a matter of just sex for some intangible or other type of non-monetary compensation, wow, we're talking about billions of transactions each year against the law. If the definition by statute and codification is that prostitution only occurs through the exchange of some monetary currency, well, that means that what the pimp is doing is legal, baby. And therefore the pimp can be all in the open and in a whole nother game, a whole new world, Disneyland. And in that process, the pimp loses faith in the country because, or the government, because the pimp does not need the government at that point. So, and the pimp can act out in the open. And again, some people say, well, the statutes may differ from state to state, from city to city. And it may be such that when a pimp has enough clout in a team, the pimp can change the laws. Adjust that over there for us, baby. I don't say baby very naturally because I don't. Let's be respectful of babies. So we're gonna find another joint. Let's just let that go. We don't have to imitate a pimp. So the pimp just establishes a lobby, and just says, just those statutes for us. Limit it to just monetary transactions. Don't deal with like favors. That's because that's too ambiguous. You're gonna have to call out a lot of kinfolk if you just make it ambiguous like that. So when we just use our gold and silver, that don't apply to what you're talking about. We're not dealing with money. So that's how manipulable, malleable the law is. Yeah, nobody worry about that. Nobody's gonna kind of think about that. Just low key, low, the mechanisms. Just a little slight joint right there. It's all legal. Prostitution, sex for barter, legal. And the pimp loses faith in the government because the pimp doesn't need government. And that's the telltale sign of the flat line of the government. Because at that point, anything goes. Anything goes. How about that? Who is that? Trying to think, 1991, 92. Pimpin' ain't easy. So, anyways, so if the United States doesn't do it proactive, if the United Nations doesn't come in formally, if the United States is obstructive from it organically happening from within, from however how it already is, just further and further and further, and you can look outside at the moment and see how it's happening. So. And there's nobody else to blame but one's own self. So there it is. The further implications is that in that fourth scenario of refusal, of just being so belligerent and ignoring the inevitability and doing so much just to like stick to what one knows, the stranglehold that one thinks one has already, just that blindsidedness of pretending invincibility and everything else like that. The woeful and intentional ignorance and the hubris. Black, white, just American. And it's not hate, it's just acknowledging this. Within America, there's just this woeful belligerence of being ignorant. It's called association football. That's just like a prime example of the ignorance and the belligerence. Just because we have big guns, we can do what we want to do. Big money, we can do what we want to do. It don't make sense. It's illogical. Everybody else around the world does differently, but we can do what we want to do. And you got to do it too. This is what it looks like, just for your information. This is what it is, actually, for your information. I'm giving you a metaphor, and it's not just a metaphor. It's actually an example, and it's a symptom, and it's a metaphor for a larger phenomena. And it's as simple as the Ultimate Fighting Championship. When I look at the video of the first championship over 30 years ago at this point. It's actually very interesting. Jim Brown is one of the hosts. It's comparatively speaking, it's like a very low budget, and that's no shade. It's just like, it's interesting to see that. And again, it's humble roots, so we appreciate that. I think there were 8 fighters initially in the first tournament, and the thing is, it was a tournament. Like there were 3 rounds, knockout rounds, literally knockout rounds. And after each round, then the next round would go. So each fighter to get to the championship would fight 3 fights: quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. So um, it's interesting because like there were 8 fighters. So and these are fighters like you don't know who these fighters are. Again, this is 30 years ago. Everybody knows boxing, heavyweight boxing. That's what everybody knows. The biggest, baddest person is the heavyweight champion. Mike Tyson was the brethren at that moment. So that's what everybody knows. Everybody in the United States, but also around the world. That's what people know. Now, people also know that there's karate, there's jujitsu, there's taekwondo, there's kickboxing. So yeah. But we don't know. There's wrestling. We look at the Olympics. Yeah, they're big guys and everything else like that. But no, if they get into the ring with Mike Tyson, oh, it's a done deal. Mike Tyson, eat them up. So then the question becomes, well, what if it was just a ring and anybody can do what anybody wanted to do, Mike Tyson or whatever? Like who would win at that one? Oh, okay, all right. I still think it's gonna be Mike Tyson because come on, man, he hit too hard. The people ain't got no defense for what Mike Tyson do. He's a heavyweight. All he does do is hit him up twice. Look at how Mike Tyson knocking fools out in the first round. Y'all, they don't have the defenses. He's too quick. He's too powerful. 3 jabs, three hits, combo. They're not gonna come up from that. They can grapple all they want. They're not gonna deal with his combos. And if they try to get close, hit him with a body shot. They don't have his defenses. They're not gonna have the defenses against him. It's gonna be Mike Tyson all day. Okay. But that's the mentality. And it's very understandable. Like I can't say that I had the same mentality because I was too young. I just like, well, interesting. But that's a lot of the mentality. It's going to be the heavyweight boxer. The biggest heavyweight boxer is who were running things, world heavyweight boxing champions, were Americans, very often American black kinfolk, for years and decades. That's my understanding. Muhammad Ali, Larry Holmes. I'm trying to think between Holmes and Tyson. There were some few cats, but eventually Tyson beats Holmes and then eventually gets the title again. So, anyways, I mean, obviously the lineage continues before that. Sonny Liston, Frazier, George Foreman, Sugar Ray Robinson, go all the way back to Jack Johnson additionally. So, but anyway, I mean, obviously there's others as well. I don't know if Rocky Marciano ever won the championship belt, but obviously there are other heavyweights, but that's pretty much what people know. And so there's a certain arrogance, there's a certain hubris, there's a certain ignorance that thinking, it's been this way for decades, for generations. And the heavyweight boxing champion at the moment, Mike Tyson, ain't nobody gonna mess with him. All these other forms, kickboxing, everything, yeah, they might got some skills, but they don't have that heavyweight power and quickness, and they're not gonna be able to deal with those close in jabs to the body and everything else like that. And all Mike Tyson got to do is connect with the uppercut or connect with a combo, and it's a done deal. Very understandable. So in that first tournament, they got fighters from all different type of backgrounds. There's a sumo wrestler. There's a kinfolk that does shoot fighting, I think it's called, from Japan. Don't even still to this day I don't know what that is specifically. And it's interesting. I'll get to that in a minute, God willing. But there's a brethren from Netherlands. That was he's just like this, like just a scrapper. Like I'm trying to remember what his style of fighting was, but he described himself as just like a fighter. He don't give a fuck. He don't care about rules. He'll bite. He'll scratch. He'll do anything. So he said everybody else there was a martial artist. He said he was a fighter. So interesting. So I want to abstain from delving into like racial epithets. But he was just like, by his own definition, just like a nasty dude. You don't. And he's very honest about it. Like, yeah, no, I'm not a nice guy. So he was one of the fighters. There was another heavy. There he wasn't. I think he was a middleweight, and I think he said he had a title bout with Hitman Hearns at some point. So he was a middleweight, I think thereabouts, like contender, like legit, like trained in the echelons. Sumo wrestler. I think there was a few other mixed martial arts types, kinfolk. A couple big dudes who had some experience in these types of tournaments or whatever else. But again, everybody's name is going to be unrecognizable because it was just like cats who was fighting in tournaments and like, it's another tournament. Okay, money. Okay, let's fight. So anyways, in the first fight, It was the Dutch Brethren fighter, the Nasty Brethren, against the sumo wrestler from one of the islands. And at the very beginning, the Netherlands Brethren did a kick to the jaw of the sumo wrestler, knocked out a tooth. There was a partial tooth in the Brethren's foot. Then from there, went on to hit him, broke his hand in that process, hitting him, but pretty much like KO'd him at the very beginning. So whoa, that sumo wrestler just got done. And then there were a few other bouts. Some of the brethren passed away since then because there was a reunion. There's a reunion video that was shown a few years ago. I just saw recently, but I think it was recorded just a few years ago. That was like everybody sitting at the table having dinner together and talking about that first fight. It was actually a beautiful thing to see in terms of the kinfolk being cordial with each other, respectful for each other, and talking about their experience and what they learned from that. Obviously, there's Gracie, Royce Gracie, who wins the actual tournament and like comes in, and that's the whole thing that we go to in terms of talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu particularly, and like just like educating people about combat and my skills and everything. Like I'm a scholar, so I'm not going to even profess to have some type of thing, but I study the game and also study the principles. And again, I talk about how the principles in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu are applicable to the streets, gangsterism, politics, economics, and additionally, the whole notion of being non-pugilistic, not relying upon strikes and blows to injure and incapacitate, or not necessarily incapacitate, but to injure somebody else, and instead utilizing the aggression and the aggressive momentum of an attacker against themselves, and having the skills to grapple with an individual, an aggressor, to the point of either being able to apply the person in a chokehold, an arm hold, or a leg hold, to the point that the attacker submits, or upon the refusal to submit, unconsciousness, or in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, actually, breakings of limbs, which significantly incapacitate an aggressor and then lend themselves to further incapacitation or otherwise. So, but the point is not to injure anybody. It's not to hurt anybody. It's simply to subdue the aggression. And that same principle is applicable to economics, politics, gangsterism, and otherwise. So that's what we appreciate. That's what we study. That's what we cultivate expertise within. Now, that being said, there were a number of other fighters, and second round, Gracie. Okay. My point for all this is this: that the middleweight fighter. I think his first fight was against Royce Gracie. So again, Royce Gracie, this is his first fight being shown in public and everything else. And he's looking lanky and wearing this gi, looking all corny. And the other brother, here's the thing, yeah, as corny. And to be honest, I've said that as a way of like joking Royce Gracie, as a way of like showing how people underestimate him because of how he looks. Now, that being said, the other brother looks silly, and I'm gonna tell you why. And it's not a redeeming thing. Like, he looks silly and it shows he's silly. And it's this: the other brother, again, he's the boxer. He's the one who's trained and a contender, middleweight or whatever his class is. He's a middleweight boxer, and that's a skill set. So everybody plays to their skill set. Royce Gracie comes in wearing the gi within his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tradition. The other brother, who's American, Black Brethren, comes in, and he's got a glove on, a boxing glove on his left hand, bare hand with a right, but a boxing glove on his left hand. Now, presumably the logic is he's going to utilize his boxing skills to keep his attacker at bay, and is going to use that jab to keep a distance, and recognizing that if he's using that jab, if he's bare knuckled, it's susceptible to easy break, just hitting the nose or hitting eye socket or something like that. Particularly when looking for later rounds or later bouts in the tournament, like, it's so easy for that left hand, that jab, knuckle pop or whatever else like that, and it does. So the logic is understandable to keep a glove on that one. Meanwhile, with the right hand, the power hand, like a knockout, not hitting as much with a knockout blow, or if we're doing some combos, but still can grab and push off or whatever, still have some functionality with the right hand. So that's presumably the logic, and it's understandable. But at the same time, It's ignorant, and that's just looking back, particularly 30 years since before. Looking at it since 30 years later, even looking at it 10 years later, or five, even just looking at it later that evening, you just see that was silly. Like, that makes no sense. But that's what the kinfolk's mindset is. That's what they know. All they know is boxing. They don't know about grappling. They don't know about the efficacy of grappling. And additionally, and that, yeah, you might be able to keep a person at bay with a jab when they're not allowed to charge and grab. But yo, if you just rely upon that jab, and somebody like, oh, there it goes. Okay, now what you doing? How about boom, boom, boom? Done. So again, that's and when I look at that video just a few weeks ago, for the first time in a long time, and I see that, I just like, oh no, no, you're not serious. But again, that was 30 years ago. The brethren did not know better. His team did not know better, and thus they were doing the best they can with what they knew, and with a wee bit of that hubris too. Um, but point is, that's what American kinfolk look like now when endeavoring to compete with the world. Got that one boxing glove on and one hand, up against a seasoned, generations trained martial artist, disciplined martial artist who knows. That's what the world is going. I mean, that's what the United States is going up against. That's what Americans are going up against. And Americans say, yo, I got skills and I got my glove. It's called association football. So yeah, sometimes kinfolk learn in different ways, but that's just how silly the game looks right now, and people can't be told otherwise because people refuse. Many people can't be told otherwise because many people refuse to look outside. People are just so conditioned and so trained just to think in a very tunnelistic kind of way. It's that frog in the well who's never been outside the well. And when the outside frog comes in from the ocean and talks about the ocean, this frog in the well says, yeah, well, how big can your ocean be? It's not as big as my well. You just haven't seen and you're not willing to see. So that's what we're trying to tell kinfolk on. It's not even just a matter about like dealing with other cultures and other languages and other customs. It's like dealing with other worlds and other realms, and having a literacy, having a functionality with that. And kinfolk just accustomed to knocking fools out because they just been, that's what all who's been put in front of them. But once in front of like that grappler, who knows? It's a done deal. So when seeing that fight, it's just like, oh, man, what is that dude doing? And what is his team setting him up for? They have, I mean, you do not let a dude go out like, now that's again looking at 30 years since the fact, but it's a testimony of how much the game has changed and how much the mindset has changed in America concerning Ultimate Fighting Championship, because nobody comes in with boxing gloves. That's probably against the rules, because it's like, no, this is a serious bout. What are you doing? So nobody comes in with boxing gloves, first of all. There are adjusted grappling gloves that I'm aware of now, and there's a lot of regulations about what's allowed with that. But part of the talk at the table, and the talk of like the experts, the Hall of Famers and the legends that have emerged since then when talking about the sport, in addition, is like, yo, that changed the game. That showed people, particularly in the United States, but around the world, not just about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the Gracie family, but just about something outside of boxing, and like how limited boxing actually is, and what, not just a matter in terms of like an effective pugilism methodology of pugilism, but just like the whole skill set of what goes into combat, physical, physical hand-to-hand combat. Like boxing is just such a limited part of it. When you talk about kicking, grappling, and holds and submissions, and additionally, so it requires training in each of those aspects for anybody who's going to proclaim to be some type of proficient practitioner in that field. The game has changed huge since then, 30 years ago, because of the Gracies, because of Royce Gracie, particularly because of that tournament. And now it's like the standard. When you see people in United Fighting Championship, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, MMA, and additionally, the standard, like just like the very basics, is what Royce Gracie was doing in that first fight. And so that's what we're talking about in terms of dealing with the world. Americans are very accustomed to just being American and that being enough. And coming in with that glove looking stupid and just being confident, yo, I'm knocking fools out. What you talking about? We got the history and we got this and the other. We do what we want to do. What's going on? What's up? What's happening? You have no idea. So, anyways, that's the metaphor. Now, that being said, one thing to say on the brethren's behalf, that boxer, he's a beautiful brethren. Like when we watched that video of the dinner, he's probably the nicest guy at that table. And there seem to be some nice guys. There are guys who seem to be nice guys at that table, but he's like the nicest guy there that we from in our estimation, because he's humble. He just like just didn't know. And now how much of it is scripted, how much are people coached about what to say and everything else like that, how much of it is a promotion for the sport. But he was very humble. He was very lighthearted. He was very honest and candid. And I mean, you respect that. We respect that. I mean, it's 30 years later, whatever. But he gives his props to Royce Gracie. And enough said. Like it speaks for itself. And he mentions like his own credentials. Like it doesn't detract from his boxing career in terms of his performance in that particular tournament. Because like it's a different skill set, it's a different game, and it's recognizing that it takes much further than just having boxing training to get into that ring when the rules are different or when the rules are nil. So we appreciate that. And again, like I said, the brethren from the Netherlands, from Holland, same thing. He gives props to Royce Gracie because he actually faces Royce Gracie in the finals in the championship round. By that point, again, he had a tooth fragment in his foot from the first round. He had broken hand from the punches going into the second round. But even then, like he said, like, yo, he's a nasty, like, don't give a fuck fighter. He don't care. And he was probably, like, people were looking at Ken Shamrock. And again, that pause on Ken Shamrock for a second. And interesting, first of all, his name, because he does not look Irish at all. Maybe he's mixed Irish, but he looks straight up Rocky Marciano, Rocky Balboa type thing. Now, that's not to detract from him, but it's like okay, what's going on with that marketing? Now, that's one thing. The other thing also is that he's described as a shoot fighter or shoot something, and with experience of fighting within and undefeated within Japanese tournaments. So that's very interesting because he does have grappling skills, and he was the one fighter who had, other than Royce Gracie, who had, well, that's not actual because there were some heavyweight wrestlers in there that got beat before the final round. But Ken Shamrock went against Royce Gracie in that second round, and Royce Gracie actually defeats him rather expediently in that second round. The second round of the tournament, there was no rounds in each of the fights. Royce Gracie beats Ken Shamrock maybe like in a minute thereabouts. It was comparatively quick, and Ken Shamrock taps out because Royce Gracie had him in a headlock, chokehold. So the thing about it is that when it happens, Ken Shamrock taps out, and when he does, Royce Gracie releases his hold, but the referee didn't recognize the tap out when it initially happens. So the referee continues to like look at like the fight still going on, and so at that point there was like a hesitation. Royce Gracie was still on top of Ken Shamrock, but had let go of his hold, and he's noticing like the referee's letting the fight go on, and at that point, like, yo, Royce Gracie tightened up again and like, yo, you tap, and Ken Shamrock, there's like a hesitation, like, wait a minute, I can still go on, but nah. So Ken Shamrock acknowledges, yeah, he tapped, and then so the fight was stopped. And then Ken Shamrock is interviewed after the match, and Ken Shamrock actually he's a very noble and humble man in that interview, and there's a lot of respect and appreciation for him because one, first of all, he's trying to catch his breath, but second, he's answering questions when he's just like, but he was like, yeah, no, he got beat, he tapped out, he acknowledges that, and the thing he said is that. Now again, he up to that point he's undefeated, and again like he's a seasoned fighter presumably at that point in Japanese shoot fighting. Still don't know what Japanese shoot fighting is, but what he says in that initial interview is that he was not prepared. Like he knew about something about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He didn't train in that. He didn't like spar, I guess, with people who were trained in that. Because I guess the whole thing didn't have that type of sophistication of like sparring as preparation. It was just a matter of like training and then just being ready. So there was a lot of unknowns. But Ken Shamrock had experience in grappling and a lot of the basic mechanics in grappling. And so he himself was describing that his strategy was to go for an ankle lock on Royce Gracie. So that's what he was concentrating on. And in that process, he didn't guard his neck as he says he should have. And because of that, Royce Gracie, they talk about in the martial arts like giving one's back. And I'm going on. It's past midnight now, yeah. Royce Gracie talks about Ken Shamrock giving him his back. Like that's like a give in to like just get the chokehold. And additionally, so Ken Shamrock didn't protect in that respect. And so he speaks to that at the post interview. And I'm starting to feel my eyes now too. He speaks to that at the post interview. Says like he didn't guard against his neck, and so because of that, like he got into the submission hold, and he actually apologizes for not giving a better fight, which is like wow, that's super humble, super humble, super humility. So respect for that. He acknowledges what happens. Now, the thing about it though is that if he's like again, what is shoot fighting in Japan? What is that? Because if he has experience in grappling, and if that's part of what's involved in shoot fighting, then and it's in Japan, it just seems like there should have been some type of familiarity and like preparation in terms of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is from Japan, and if shoot fighting is involving grappling, there has to be some type of proximity with jiu-jitsu. That's just presumptuously, but Ken Shamrock says he was unprepared. Now, the interesting thing is that afterwards, like later on, and it might have been a huge controversy, and again, the whole thing of race comes into play about, you can't, don't concede, and da 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 da. So I think after the fight, again, presumably Ken Shamrock gets under pressure for like being too conciliatory or too respectful or whatever else, and then afterwards, like Ken Shamrock talks about like hints or tries to hint of like Royce Gracie cheating by using the gi to get the chokehold. And so a number of the other fighters says, no, he had a straight up chokehold. And part of the technique in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is utilizing the gi, recognizing that, the body gets sweaty, the hands get sweaty. The gi gives something for somebody to hold on to. It's the technique, presumably is legal. And to be honest, the Gracies had a lot of say in terms of what the rules are, in terms of what's allowed. And additionally, particularly in the beginning. And so people fault the Gracies for that. But again, that's a lot of shade. Because whatever the accusations are about, like it's not a matter of fixing per se, but just like dictating the terms and making it favorable for one style of fighting and everything else like that. Kind of sort of, but like who's doing something alternatively, and where's the with a standard of objectivity accordingly. And anyway, so there's that, and to be honest, I'm uncertain what the actual rules are concerning gis and chokeholds and holding things. But like I said, even the fighters in that conversation were describing how Royce Gracie had a clean hold in the chokehold. I don't even know if holding the gi would have been an unclean hold. But Ken Shamrock concedes that again. Now they had a rematch a number of tournaments later. And in that rematch, it basically was a draw. Now, that might, to be honest, there's a high speculation, there's high suspicion of that being a fix to help give Ken Shamrock some saved face of like saying, oh, okay. Because apparently, like he was, he became a big name kinfolk after that. But it seemed like he has a lot of standing in certain crowds before that fight, and his performance against Royce Gracie was somewhat of a slight concerning that standing, not just towards him but towards the constituency, and because of that, there seemed to be a lot of sentiment in the fighting world for Royce Gracie to give a rematch so that Ken Shamrock can save some face from that initial like quick defeat, not just for Ken Shamrock but for the sport. And for the constituency around Ken Shamrock. So in that, I don't know how many rematches there were, but in this particular rematch, I think it was UFC 5, because I think Royce Gracie won the next three, or thereabouts. One time he got injured and wasn't able to continue in one of the tournaments, but other than that, he was undefeated in the tournaments. Then I guess by the fifth one or whatever, it's like, how many times do I got to do this? But in that respect, then there's the opportunity for Ken Shamrock to save face. And it was a draw. And in that draw, in saving face, he was able to put a dinger on Royce Gracie's face, because now one explanation can be that Ken Shamrock trained and prepared and is a skillful fighter, and was able to learn some of the techniques of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to be able to defend and be proactive in those tactics, and so already physically fit and everything else like that, strong, and now he's got further skills and preparation, and so in that rematch, he's able to do that, to be able to fight to a draw, which was, I guess, unheard of for Royce Gracie by that point, because Royce Gracie by that point had a huge reputation for himself. So for Ken Shamrock to be able to fight to a draw is saying a lot. I think the only person that Royce Gracie was defeated to in like the height of his career, if at all, I don't know his entire record, but it was one defeat, and maybe it might have been a couple of defeats to the same person, but it was a Japanese specialist in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who found a technique against the Gracie family of like getting through the defenses, and one of that techniques was just like jumping up in the air and flying down against that ground defense of being on the back and with the legs up. So just jumping high over the legs and coming in with punches. And so that seemed to be effective in even just throwing off, particularly Royce Gracie. I remember seeing Royce Gracie's face in shock, like, yo, what is this brother doing? But that was the one person who was called like the Gracie Hunter or whatever. But so up to that point, Royce Gracie has a huge name for himself, reputation. So for him to fight to a draw to Ken Shamrock, that's much to Ken Shamrock's credit. How much of that was staged and arranged, there's high suspicion in that respect. But in that process, the bout, initially I think the bouts were untimed, like it just goes on. But at this in the particular match, there was a time, and the time limit was reached. I think it might have been half an hour, something like that, or 15 minutes, whatever, maybe half an hour. They got to that. No, probably 15 minutes. They got to the end of that time thing. Then they had an overtime. So that was an indication of like, oh yeah, this thing's going to be a stalemate. Like if they fought for 15 minutes and not one of them got the advantage, like it's not doing an overtime is not going to be much of a difference. However, that being said, what that did, and this might have been part of the script, what that did once hitting the overtime, then both fighters know, okay, here's the time, and in breaking up and getting a distance, then in that space of resetting, Ken Shamrock has the opportunity of hitting Royce Gracie with a jab. Now, Royce Gracie, and part of the technique is not that emphasizing in terms of the pugilism and defenses and strikes and everything else like that. It's primarily grappling. So there's further susceptibility to those types of attacks. But anyway, so after doing the full time, being reset, that was an opportunity, a favorable opportunity for Ken Shamrock to put his mark without actually winning the bout or whatever, but at the same time getting a little bit of a revenge for the first loss, even though the record is just going to show a draw. So boom, he got a dinger on Royce Gracie. So now Royce Gracie's eye looks very bad. Then they start to wrestle and everything, and then again they wrestle to a draw. So now that's a draw. Both are happy. Ken Shamrock gets some of his credibility and ego and mojo back, and then Royce Gracie still has his intact record of undefeatedness in UFC championship fighting. So anyways, they both of them are at the table at that gathering after the reunion kind of thing. The sumo wrestler is there, and he's actually a rather jovial brethren as well. Again, a couple of the brethren have passed away since then, a blessed memory. The Holland fighter is there, and trying to think, there's probably somebody else who's there as well. The boxer is there, and Royce Gracie is there, and pretty much everybody is just talking about, yo, Royce Gracie, you did that thing, and that was pretty much it. Royce Gracie is very humble and gracious, and he's like complimenting everybody else and honoring everybody else's performance and everything. Um, but they basically the consensus was how much that tournament and the Gracie family like changed fighting around the world, particularly tournament fighting, and additionally the game is changed. So all that being said, we apply it to, again, the economics and politics, and military, and streets of today, and kinfolk coming in with their one glove, talking about jab, 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 and they got this, and we do what we want to do. Yo, the world is a different place, and the world is here. The world is happening, and kinfolks are subsidized with this tunnel vision. Um, so we try to wake up kinfolk as much as we can. Um, that's what we got to share for this moment. His Majesty Haile Selassie I talks about the world as a different place, prepares his country, his kinfolk, his constituency for the world of a different place. It was 2 hours ago that I said a blessing. And that was not today, technically speaking, based upon some clocks. Fantastic. It's going to be difficult to wake up now, and still lightweight, have an appetite, and things to do. Junky it is. That influences the mental and makes one further susceptible to just ill compensational decisions, particularly emphasizing comfort, like, oh, da da da, I don't feel, da da, let me get something, da da da. So, God willing, in a very brief period, at some point very soon, I will be energized to clean and heal and progress. So, anything else to share now? That's much of it. I was considering recording this on the scene of the place I was describing. It's not necessary, because it's beneficial to go get some stuff online, but it's not necessary. It's not a priority. It's not a priority. This is not a priority. Utilizing money increases our susceptibility to this envelopment. Purchasing food from the conventional processes, envelopment. Utilizing or downloading the articles, envelopment. Downloading videos like the ones I just mentioned, envelopment. And so this is part of the nature of the relationship, and the consequences. We can do better. In person, humble, non-predatory, piety, copaceticness, harmony with the life around us, accepting our sovereignty within us and the sovereignty around us as well, continually, genuinely, regularly, the rhythms and the rituals, like prayer, meditation, and being quiet. The best things to share with our children, particularly for receiving further solutions. Recognizing how our ciphers are influenced by additions. Cultivating a stillness within ourselves And within that stillness, being able to register the vibrations of others beyond what is said, even beyond what is done, positive and negative, and being able to relay that back so that kinfolk can be further aware and we can be further aware. Trees and green, black skies, hazy cloudy, lamp posts, street lights, and cyber glow blue screens and red eyes searching for calmness and quiet and coolness. Quasimodo. And with that being said, again, we give all thanks and praise the Most High. Blessed love and peace in Rastafari.